Picture this. You're scrolling through TikTok when you see your billionaire husband kissing another woman at Coachella. 50 million people have already seen it. Your phone is exploding with notifications. Photographers are camping outside your mansion, and you're 7 months pregnant. This is exactly what happened to Madison Torres when a viral video destroyed her perfect life in 30 seconds. But that was just the beginning of her nightmare. What Madison didn't know was that her husband Jack Sterling had been planning her destruction for over a year. The affair, part of his plan. The public humiliation, calculated. The empty bank accounts she discovered the next morning, all orchestrated to frame her for federal crimes while he escaped with billions in custody of their unborn child. But here's what Jack Sterling didn't expect. His wife was about to play chess while he thought they were playing checkers. The pregnant woman everyone pitied was actually gathering evidence that would expose one of Silicon Valley's biggest criminal conspiracies. This story has everything: viral social media scandals, FBI raids, airport confrontations, and a mistress literally begging on her knees at a private jet runway while federal agents closed in. The question is, can a woman with no money, no allies, and no legal rights take down a billionaire who controls everything? Stay with me for the next hour because this revenge story will leave you absolutely speechless. Madison Torres stood on the marble balcony of her Malibu mansion, one hand resting on her 7-month pregnant belly, the other holding her phone as she captured the perfect sunset shot. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly before her, painted in shades of gold and pink that her 3 million Instagram followers would devour within minutes. "Living my best life with my amazing husband," she typed, adding heart emojis and tagging Jack Sterling. The notification sound chimed immediately as likes poured in. Comments flooded the post within seconds. "Couple goals. So jealous. When is baby Sterling due?" Madison smiled, but it felt hollow. The truth was far different from the curated perfection she displayed online. Jack had barely spoken to her in weeks, spending most nights in his home office or traveling for business. When he did acknowledge her presence, it was with the detached politeness of a stranger. She walked back into their sprawling 8,000-square-foot home, her heels clicking against the Italian marble floors. Every surface gleamed with expensive perfection: the custom kitchen with its waterfall quartz countertops, the living room dominated by a 75-inch television that Jack used to watch financial news, the dining room table that seated 12 but rarely hosted anyone. The house felt more like a museum than a home, all sharp angles and expensive art that Jack's interior designer had chosen without any input from Madison. Nothing felt warm or welcoming, especially not for a baby. She had tried to add personal touches over the years, but Jack always found reasons to remove them. Too cluttered, he would say, not sophisticated enough for their lifestyle. Madison paused in front of the massive mirror in their foyer, studying her reflection. At 28, she was still beautiful in the effortless way that had first caught Jack's attention 5 years ago. Her long brown hair fell in perfect waves over her shoulders, and her green eyes still held the intelligence that had made her a rising star in marketing before she gave it all up to be Jack's wife. But now, 7 months pregnant and feeling more isolated than ever, she barely recognized herself. The confidence that had once made her magnetic in boardrooms had been slowly eroded by Jack's constant corrections, his subtle put-downs disguised as helpful suggestions, his way of making her feel like everything she did was somehow insufficient. The nursery remained unfinished, despite Madison's repeated requests for Jack's involvement. She had chosen a gender-neutral theme of soft yellows and greens, with a beautiful rocking chair positioned by the window, where she imagined herself feeding their baby while watching the sunrise over the Pacific. But the crib was still in boxes, the walls remained unpainted, and half the furniture sat in storage, because Jack insisted they wait until after the company's initial public offering next month. "We need to focus on the IPO right now," he had told her just last week when she mentioned the nursery again. "There will be plenty of time to play house after Sterling Tech goes public, and we're worth over $1 billion. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister Sophia. "How are you feeling? Any news on the nursery? I could come help this weekend." Madison hesitated before typing back. "All good. Jack's been super busy with work, but we're getting there. Maybe next weekend?" Another lie to add to the growing collection. She had become an expert at maintaining the facade of the perfect tech billionaire's wife, even as her marriage crumbled in private. The irony wasn't lost on her that she had once been a successful marketing executive herself, building campaigns that convinced millions of people to buy products they didn't need. Now she was using those same skills to sell a version of her life that didn't exist. Madison had met Jack at a tech conference in San Francisco, back when she was 23 and climbing the corporate ladder at a prestigious advertising agency. He had been the keynote speaker, 30 years old and already worth $50 million from his first company. She had been assigned to manage the afterparty, and Jack had spent the entire evening talking to her instead of networking with potential investors. "You're wasted in advertising," he had told her over champagne on the hotel rooftop. "You should be building something meaningful, not just selling other people's dreams." Within 6 months, they were engaged. Within a year, they were married in a ceremony that made the cover of 3 different magazines. Jack had convinced her to quit her job and focus on being his partner in all things, supporting his vision for Sterling Tech while they built their life together. For the first few years, it had felt like a fairy tale. Jack was attentive and romantic, flying her to Paris for weekend getaways and surprising her with jewelry that cost more than most people's annual salaries. He valued her opinions on business decisions and credited her with helping him navigate difficult negotiations. But somewhere along the way, things had changed. Jack's success with Sterling Tech had made him more demanding, more controlling. He began criticizing Madison's clothes, her friends, even her family. He convinced her that Sophia was jealous of their success and that her old colleagues were only interested in networking opportunities. Slowly, Madison found herself isolated from everyone except Jack and his world of tech executives and venture capitalists. She became an accessory to his success story, the beautiful wife who smiled at charity galas and posed for photos, but had no real voice in their relationship. The pregnancy had been planned, or at least Jack had said he wanted children. But as soon as Madison started showing, Jack's interest seemed to evaporate. He complained about her changing body, made excuses to avoid her doctor appointments, and spent increasing amounts of time away from home. "I need space to think about the future," he had told her when she asked about his absences. "The IPO is the most important thing happening in our lives right now. Everything else has to wait." That evening, Jack returned home after midnight, reeking of expensive perfume that definitely wasn't hers. Madison recognized the scent. It was Tom Ford Black Orchid, distinctive and sensual, nothing like the light floral fragrances she preferred. He mumbled something about dinner with investors and headed straight to his office, closing the door with a firm click that echoed through the empty house. Madison sat alone in their king-size bed, staring at the ceiling and wondering when she had become invisible in her own life. The baby kicked strongly, as if sensing her distress, and she placed both hands on her belly. "At least I have you, little one," she whispered. "We'll figure this out together." But even as she said the words, Madison felt the first stirrings of something she hadn't experienced since meeting Jack 5 years ago: genuine fear about her future. She had signed a prenuptial agreement before their wedding, something Jack's lawyers had insisted was standard for someone of his net worth. At the time, drunk on love and convinced their marriage would last forever, she had barely read the details. Now, lying in the darkness, listening to Jack's muffled phone calls through the office door, she wondered if she had made the biggest mistake of her life. What would happen if their marriage fell apart? She had no job, no income of her own, no real assets beyond the jewelry Jack had given her. She had been out of the workforce for 5 years, and the marketing industry moved so fast that her skills might already be obsolete. The next morning, Madison woke to find Jack already gone, a brief note on the kitchen counter explaining he had flown to San Francisco for meetings with potential investors. No goodbye kiss, no inquiry about her doctor's appointment that afternoon, no acknowledgement that she existed beyond being another responsibility to manage. She poured herself a cup of decaf coffee and opened Instagram, ready to craft another perfect post about her perfect life. But as she scrolled through her feed, looking for inspiration among the carefully curated lives of other influencer wives, something caught her eye that made her blood run cold. A notification had popped up at the top of her screen. Someone had tagged her in a TikTok video. Madison rarely used TikTok. Jack thought it was beneath their social status. but curiosity got the better of her. She clicked on the notification and watched her world explode in 30 seconds. Madison's hands shook as she stared at her phone screen. There, trending at #1 on TikTok with over 50 million views, was a video that shattered her world in 30 seconds. The clip showed Jack and a stunning blonde woman at Coachella, their bodies pressed together as they danced to the pulsing electronic music. But it wasn't just dancing. Jack's hands roamed freely over the woman's curves, sliding down her bare back and pulling her closer as the bass dropped. Their lips met in a passionate kiss that left no room for misinterpretation, tongues intertwined as if they were alone in the world instead of surrounded by thousands of festival goers. The woman in the video was everything Madison wasn't. Young, probably early 20s, with platinum blonde hair extensions and the kind of surgically enhanced curves that looked perfect in crop tops and booty shorts. She moved with the confidence of someone who had never been told to tone herself down or be more appropriate for her husband's image. The caption read, "When you realize you're the other woman because he's married to someone else. This tech billionaire really thought he could play me. But karma's a bitch, and so am I. Hashtag exposed, hashtag cheater, hashtag pregnant, wife don't know, hashtag Sterling, hashtag Coachella." Madison's vision blurred as she scrolled through the comments. Thousands of people had already identified Jack, and it didn't take long for them to find her Instagram account. The comments section under her latest sunset post had exploded overnight with a mixture of sympathy and cruel mockery. "Girl, your husband is cheating on you at Coachella right now. Someone needs to tell this poor woman the truth. This is so embarrassing. She's posting about their perfect life while he's tongue deep in another woman. The audacity of men. She's literally pregnant. Wait, is this the same Madison Torres who used to work at Apex Marketing? Girl, you left your career for this? I feel so bad for her, but also this is why you never give up your independence for a man." That prenup is about to be her worst nightmare. Madison's carefully constructed world imploded in real time as she continued reading. She clicked on the TikTok user's profile. Amber Hayes, 24 years old, with 2.5 million followers and a bio that read, "Influencer, model, living my truth. Brand partnerships, amber.hayesmgmt@gmail.com." Amber's feed was a testament to expensive taste and unlimited resources. Designer clothes with price tags that made Madison's stomach turn. Exotic vacations to places she recognized from Jack's recent business trips. And expensive jewelry that sparkled against perfectly bronzed skin. There were photos from inside private jets, champagne glasses raised in first-class airline seats, and countless selfies from luxury hotel suites around the world. Madison's hands trembled as she recognized several locations from Jack's recent business trips. The rooftop bar at the Four Seasons in Miami, where he had supposedly been meeting with investors. The beach in Tulum, where he claimed to be attending a tech conference. The private dining room at Nobu in Las Vegas, where he said he was entertaining potential clients. Her stomach churned as she realized this wasn't a one-night mistake or a moment of weakness at a music festival. This was a full-blown relationship that had been going on for months, maybe longer. Every business trip, every late night at the office, every excuse about needing space to focus on the IPO. It had all been lies to cover his affair with a woman young enough to be his little sister. The doorbell rang, and Madison looked up to see a crowd of paparazzi gathering outside their gate. Someone had leaked their address, and now photographers with telephoto lenses were capturing every moment of her humiliation. She could see them through the security cameras, setting up chairs and unpacking equipment, as if they were planning to camp out for days. Her phone rang, and Sophia's name flashed on the screen. "Madison, I just saw the TikTok. Are you okay? Where's Jack?" "I don't know," Madison whispered, her voice barely audible. "He left for San Francisco this morning, but now I'm wondering if that's even true. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. This is horrible. Are you safe? Do you need me to come over?" "I'm at the house, but there are photographers everywhere. Sophia, I don't know what to do. Everyone knows. The whole world knows that my husband is cheating on me, and I was the last person to find out. Pack a bag. I'm coming to get you right now. You can't stay there with all those vultures outside." But Madison couldn't move. She sat frozen on the white leather couch, watching as her phone exploded with notifications. Tags, mentions, comments, and messages from strangers offering sympathy or cruel jokes at her expense. The hashtag #PregnantWifeGate had started trending, and memes were already circulating, with her Instagram photos side by side with screenshots from Amber's TikTok. One particularly cruel meme showed Madison's recent post about living her best life next to a screenshot of Amber and Jack kissing, with the caption, "When you're posting couple goals, but your man is at Coachella with his side chick." It had been shared over 100,000 times in the past hour. Madison tried calling Jack's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. She called his office, but his assistant claimed he was in meetings and couldn't be disturbed. She even tried calling the hotel where he supposedly was staying in San Francisco, but they had no record of a Jack Sterling registered as a guest. Every attempt to reach her husband only confirmed what the TikTok had already revealed. She was living in a fantasy while he was building a real relationship with another woman. A knock at the door made her jump. Through the security camera, she could see a reporter holding a microphone, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the early morning hour. "Mrs. Sterling, this is Amanda Chen from Entertainment Tonight. How do you feel about your husband's affair? Do you have any comment on the viral TikTok? Are you planning to divorce him? What about the baby?" Madison turned off the camera and slid down the wall to the floor, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward and uncomfortable. The perfect life she had built, the image she had crafted so carefully, was crumbling in real time for the entire world to see. She was trending on Twitter, featured on gossip blogs, and becoming a meme faster than she could process. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but you deserve to know the truth." A friend. Madison wondered who had sent the message. Was it someone who knew Jack and Amber personally? A former employee with a grudge? Someone who had seen them together and felt guilty for not speaking up sooner? The baby kicked hard against her ribs, and Madison realized with growing horror that her child would inherit this scandal. The internet was forever, and this humiliation would follow them both for years to come. Her son or daughter would grow up knowing that their father had publicly humiliated their mother while she was pregnant, that their conception had been overshadowed by infidelity and betrayal. She opened her messages and saw dozens of notifications from friends, family, and former colleagues. Most were supportive, but some carried an undertone of, "I told you so," that made her skin crawl. "Madison, I saw the news. I'm so sorry. I always thought Jack seemed controlling, but I hoped I was wrong." Sarah from her old job at Apex Marketing. "Honey, come stay with us until this blows over. The kids would love to see their Auntie Madison." Her college roommate Jessica, who had always been skeptical of Jack's charm. "I can't believe this is happening. You don't deserve this. Call me when you're ready to talk." Her mother, who lived across the country and had never quite warmed to Jack despite his wealth and success. Each message was a reminder of the life she had given up, the relationships she had sacrificed for a man who had been lying to her for months or maybe years. She had isolated herself so completely that she wasn't sure who she could trust anymore. As sirens wailed outside and more photographers gathered at the gate, Madison made her first real decision in years. She wasn't going to hide in shame like some victim. She wasn't going to let Jack control the narrative of their relationship's end the way he had controlled every other aspect of their marriage. She opened her laptop and began typing a response that would change everything. 3 days after the TikTok went viral, Jack finally returned home. Madison heard the familiar sound of his black Tesla Model S pulling into the garage and felt her heart hammering against her ribs. She had spent 72 hours rehearsing this confrontation, practicing her words in the mirror and imagining every possible scenario. But nothing could have prepared her for the man who walked through the door. Jack looked tired but not remorseful. His usually perfect appearance was slightly disheveled. His $5,000 Tom Ford suit was wrinkled from travel. His typically immaculate hair showed signs of having been run through with fingers, and there were dark circles under his brown eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. But those eyes held the same calculated coldness she had grown accustomed to over the past months, not the guilt and shame she had expected. "Madison," he said, setting down his leather Hermes briefcase as if nothing had happened. His voice carried the same tone he used in board meetings. Professional, controlled, slightly impatient. "Jack." Her voice was steadier than she felt, though her hands were clasped tightly in her lap to keep them from shaking. I think we need to talk. He sighed dramatically and loosened his silk tie, the same dismissive gesture he used when dealing with what he considered minor inconveniences. Look, I know you saw that ridiculous TikTok. I've had my legal team looking into it, and we're going to sue that girl for defamation and invasion of privacy. Amber Hayes is just some attention-seeking influencer trying to get her 15 minutes of fame. She means absolutely nothing to me. Madison stared at him in disbelief. After 3 days of radio silence, after letting her face the media circus alone while he disappeared, his response was to deny reality and threaten legal action against the woman who had exposed his lies. Jack, there are dozens of photos of you two together online now. Hotel receipts that someone leaked to TMZ, flight records that show you weren't in San Francisco yesterday like you claimed, credit card statements showing charges at restaurants where you were seen with her. This isn't some random hookup at a music festival. Jack's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but then he seemed to shift tactics. His expression softened, and he crossed the room with the confident stride that had once made Madison's heart race. He knelt beside her chair, placing his manicured hand on her swollen belly in a gesture that once would have melted her resistance. Madison, baby, you're 7 months pregnant, and your hormones are making you emotional. I understand why you might overreact to this situation, but I need you to trust me. I swear to you, on our child's life, that woman means nothing to me. It was just physical. A mistake. It meant nothing. Ha ha ha. The casual way he dismissed months of betrayal while swearing on their unborn child's life made Madison's skin crawl, but she forced herself to listen. This was the Jack Sterling the world knew, the charismatic CEO who could convince investors to hand over millions of dollars, the smooth talker who had won her over 5 years ago with his confidence and apparent sincerity. I've already ended it with her, Jack continued, his voice taking on the persuasive tone that had once made her feel like the most important person in the world. I paid her off, $2 million to disappear from Los Angeles and delete all the photos and videos she had. She signed a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement that will destroy her financially if she ever speaks about our relationship again. This will all blow over in a week, maybe less. Madison wanted to believe him more than she had ever wanted anything in her life. The alternative was too terrifying to contemplate. Raising a child alone, losing the security and lifestyle she had grown accustomed to, facing the world as a divorced single mother who had been publicly humiliated on social media. How long, she whispered, hating herself for asking, but needing to know. How long what? How long were you with her? How long have you been lying to me? Jack was quiet for a long moment, and Madison could see him calculating how much truth he could afford to tell. Finally, he spoke with the careful precision of a lawyer giving testimony. 6 months, maybe 7. But Madison, it wasn't real. It wasn't what we have. You're my wife. You're carrying my child. You're the woman I chose to build a life with. She was just entertainment, a distraction from the stress of the IPO. The word entertainment hit her like a physical blow, but Jack wasn't finished. He pulled out his iPhone and showed her a screenshot of what appeared to be Amber's TikTok account, now completely blank. See? She's already deleting everything. By tomorrow, there won't be any trace of that original video online. My legal team has been working around the clock to scrub it from the internet. Madison looked at the screen and saw that Amber's TikTok account had indeed been wiped clean. Where there had once been hundreds of videos showcasing her lavish lifestyle, there was now only a generic profile picture and zero content. She's also leaving Los Angeles, Jack added, his tone becoming more confident as he sensed Madison's wavering resolve. Moving to Miami permanently. We'll never see her again. She understands that her little stunt could have destroyed both of our lives, and she's willing to make amends by disappearing completely. For a brief, shining moment, Madison felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Maybe this nightmare could actually end. Maybe they could salvage their marriage and their family. Maybe the fairy tale wasn't over after all. Jack seemed to sense her softening and pressed his advantage. I know I messed up, Madison. I know I hurt you in the worst possible way, and I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you. But we can get through this. We're stronger than some social media scandal. I love you, and I want to be a family with you and our baby." He stood up and pulled her gently to her feet, wrapping his arms around her in the first genuine embrace they had shared in months. Madison breathed in his familiar cologne and felt her resistance crumbling despite her better judgment. "I've already scheduled marriage counseling for us," Jack continued, his lips close to her ear. "Dr. Patricia Morrison. She's the best therapist in Beverly Hills. She specializes in helping couples recover from infidelity. And I've cleared my schedule for the next 2 weeks. No business trips, no late nights at the office. Just you and me, working on rebuilding what I almost destroyed." That evening, Jack ordered her favorite Thai food from their usual restaurant on Sunset Boulevard, and they ate together on the couch for the first time in months. He asked about her recent doctor's appointments, wanting to know every detail about the baby's development. He even suggested they finally finish decorating the nursery together, making plans to visit the baby furniture store in West Hollywood the next day. Madison felt the tension in her shoulders beginning to ease as Jack returned to being the attentive, loving husband she remembered from their early years together. He held her hand while they watched Netflix, rubbing gentle circles on her palm the way he used to when they were dating. When the baby kicked, he placed his hand on her belly and talked to their unborn child, promising to be the best father he could be. Before bed, Madison posted a carefully worded statement on Instagram. "Jack and I are working through a difficult time in our marriage, but we are committed to our family and our future together. We believe that love, forgiveness, and hard work can overcome any obstacle. Thank you to everyone who has shown us support during this challenging period, and please respect our privacy as we focus on healing." The comments were mixed, but many of her followers seemed willing to give them a second chance. The news cycle was already moving on to the next scandal. A pop star's surprise pregnancy and a politician's financial irregularities were dominating the headlines. Madison began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could put this humiliation behind them. She went to bed that night feeling more hopeful than she had in days. Jack held her close, his arm wrapped protectively around her growing belly, whispering sweet promises in her ear. "Everything is going to be okay," he murmured as she drifted off to sleep. "I promise you, Madison, this is all going to be just a bad memory soon. We're going to be stronger than ever." Madison closed her eyes and allowed herself to believe him, her body relaxing against his for the first time in months. She had no idea that across town, Amber Hayes was very much still in Los Angeles, living in a luxury apartment that Jack was paying for, and the $2 million payoff was just the first part of a much larger, more sinister plan. As Madison slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, Jack stared at the ceiling with the calculating expression of a chess master planning his next move. Phase 1 of his strategy was complete. Now it was time to implement Phase 2. Madison woke up the next morning to an empty bed and the smell of coffee wafting from the kitchen. For the first time in weeks, she felt genuinely optimistic about her marriage. Jack's promises from the night before echoed in her mind as she got dressed for her prenatal appointment. Their first session of marriage counseling was scheduled for the following day, and Jack had sworn he would accompany her to see Dr. Martinez this afternoon. She chose her outfit carefully, a flowing maternity dress in soft blue that made her feel feminine and beautiful despite her growing belly, comfortable flats that wouldn't hurt her swollen feet, and the diamond necklace Jack had given her for their third anniversary. Looking in the mirror, she almost looked like the happy pregnant woman she had always imagined she would be. She found Jack at the kitchen island, dressed in his usual sharp charcoal suit and scrolling through his phone with one hand while holding a coffee mug with the other. The morning light streaming through their floor-to-ceiling windows illuminated his profile, reminding Madison of why she had fallen in love with him in the first place. Even after everything, he was still devastatingly handsome. "Good morning," she said, kissing his cheek and breathing in his familiar cologne. "Ready for our appointment today? Dr. Martinez said she wants to do another ultrasound, and we might be able to get some really clear photos of the baby." Jack barely looked up from his screen, his fingers moving rapidly as he typed responses to what appeared to be urgent emails. "Can't. Important board meeting today that just got moved up. The IPO timeline has been accelerated, and we need to finalize the prospectus with the underwriters. Maybe next time." The dismissive tone was so familiar that Madison felt her stomach drop like a stone. This was the same Jack who had ignored her for months, not the attentive husband from last night who had promised to prioritize their family. Jack, you promised we'd spend more time together. You said the next 2 weeks would be about us, about rebuilding our marriage. This appointment is important. It's not just routine. Madison, I said I'd try to make more time. I didn't say I'd drop everything and play house whenever you want attention. The IPO is next week. Sterling Tech is about to be valued at over $1 billion. I have responsibilities to my investors, my employees, my board of directors. This is bigger than both of us. The coldness in his voice was like a bucket of ice water thrown over her newfound hope. Madison stood there in her carefully chosen outfit, feeling foolish for believing anything had really changed. The man who had held her so tenderly last night was gone, replaced by the emotionally distant stranger she had been living with for months. One appointment, Jack. 2 hours out of your day to see your child and support your wife. Don't be dramatic. You've been going to these appointments alone for months, and everything has been fine. The baby's healthy, you're healthy, there's no medical emergency. I'll make the next one if I can. After Jack left in his Tesla, Madison tried to shake off her disappointment and unease. Maybe he really was just stressed about work. The IPO was a massive undertaking that would determine the future of his company and their financial security. Maybe last night was real and this morning was just a temporary setback caused by business pressures. She decided to check on the nursery, hoping to continue the progress they had talked about making together. But as she opened the door to what would be their baby's room, something felt wrong. The space looked exactly the same as it had for weeks. Boxes still stacked in the corner, walls still painted the bland beige that had come with the house, furniture still wrapped in plastic. But there was a new smell in the air. Perfume. Not the light, fresh scent she wore, but something heavier and more sensual. The same expensive fragrance she had smelled on Jack's clothes that night he came home late. Madison's heart began to race as she noticed other small details that seemed out of place. A water glass on the windowsill that she hadn't left there, an indentation in the rocking chair cushion as if someone had been sitting in it recently, and most damning of all, a single long blonde hair on the carpet near the closet. Her hands shaking, she pulled out her phone and opened the app for their home security system. Jack had installed cameras throughout the house ostensibly for security purposes, but they were usually turned off when they were home for privacy reasons. However, Madison had never removed the app from her phone, and she still had access to the cloud storage where footage was automatically saved. She scrolled back through the previous day's recordings, her heart pounding as she searched for evidence of what she already suspected. At first, everything seemed normal. Footage of her sitting alone in the living room, walking through the house, eating dinner by herself while Jack claimed to be in meetings. Then she found what she was looking for, and her blood turned to ice. The timestamp showed 2:15 p.m. the previous afternoon, just hours before Jack returned home to make his tearful apology and promise to rebuild their marriage. The video showed Jack opening the back door that led from their pool area into the kitchen, the same door that couldn't be seen by the paparazzi camped out front. Amber Hayes walked into Madison's home like she owned the place. She was even more stunning in person than in her social media photos, with platinum blonde hair that cascaded down her back in perfect waves, a body that looked like it had been sculpted by the gods, and the kind of confidence that came from knowing she was desired by powerful men. She wore a tiny black dress that probably cost more than most people's rent, and Christian Louboutin heels that clicked authoritatively on the marble floors. Madison watched in growing horror as Jack and Amber embraced passionately in her hallway, their hands already working at each other's clothes. They kissed with the familiarity of longtime lovers, not two people saying goodbye forever. Amber's fingers tangled in Jack's hair, while his hands roamed over her curves, and their passion was so intense it made Madison nauseous to watch. "I missed you so much," Amber's voice carried clearly through the security system's audio. 3 whole days of pretending to be broken up was torture. Jack laughed, the sound rich with satisfaction. "You were perfect. That little performance about deleting your social media had Madison eating out of my hand within hours." Madison's vision blurred with tears as she continued watching her husband plan her destruction with his mistress. She fast-forwarded through the footage and watched Jack lead Amber upstairs, Not to their master bedroom, but to the nursery. Her nursery, their baby's future room. The next few minutes were the most painful of Madison's life. She watched her husband have sex with his mistress on the rocking chair she had picked out for late-night feedings, their bodies intertwined among the baby clothes and stuffed animals she had carefully selected. Amber's moans of pleasure echoed through the room where Madison had imagined singing lullabies to her child. When they finished, Jack and Amber moved downstairs to the kitchen, where Madison watched her husband pour 2 glasses of expensive wine, the same bottle she had been saving to celebrate the baby's birth. "To phase 1, Jack said, clinking his glass against Amber's. She bought it completely. The tears, the promises, the marriage counseling. She's so desperate to believe in our fairy tale that she'll accept any lie I tell her." Amber laughed, a sound like breaking glass that made Madison's skin crawl. "I can't believe she fell for that whole 'you mean nothing to me' speech. Did you see her face when you swore on the baby's life? I almost felt bad for her." "Don't," Jack replied coldly. Madison was always too trusting, too soft, too willing to see the best in people. It's what made her easy to control from the beginning, and it's what's going to make this divorce settlement so much smaller than she deserves. Madison slumped against the nursery wall, her pregnant belly making it difficult to breathe as the full scope of Jack's betrayal became clear. "The prenup is bulletproof," Jack continued on the video, "but I need her to be the one to file for divorce. If she leaves me, especially after this public scandal, I can claim abandonment and emotional distress. She'll get the minimum settlement, $5 million, and I keep everything else. The house, the cars, the art collection, the stock options, all of it." Amber wound her arms around his neck, pressing her surgically enhanced breasts against his chest. "And then we'll be free to be together publicly. No more sneaking around, no more pretending I don't exist. Once the IPO closes next week, you'll be worth over $1 billion. Madison will get her little settlement and disappear, and you and I can start our real life together." "Exactly. I've already had my lawyers draft divorce papers that make me look like the wounded party. Irreconcilable differences caused by Madison's emotional instability during pregnancy. By the time we're done with her, she'll be grateful for the $5 million. Madison watched as they kissed again, sealing their conspiracy against her with champagne and celebration. The video continued for another hour, showing them planning elaborate schemes to drive Madison to file for divorce, while ensuring she looked like the unreasonable party who had destroyed their marriage. They discussed hiring private investigators to document Madison's erratic behavior, leaking stories to gossip blogs about her supposed jealousy and controlling nature, and even staging incidents that would make her appear unstable in public. Every detail had been planned with the precision of a military operation. The final nail in the coffin came when Jack pulled out his phone and showed Amber something that made them both laugh uproariously. "I already transferred most of our liquid assets to offshore accounts," Jack said. "By tomorrow, Madison won't have access to anything except her personal checking account with about $3,000 in it. When she tries to use her credit cards, they'll all be declined. She'll panic, call me frantically, and I'll explain that it's all for tax purposes related to the IPO. "You're evil," Amber said admiringly. "I love it." "I'm practical," Jack corrected. "Madison gave up her career to be my wife. She has no income, no assets in her own name, no real independence. She's completely dependent on me financially, and I'm about to use that dependence to destroy her." Madison deleted the app from her phone with trembling fingers and sat in a stunned silence. She wasn't just dealing with a cheating husband anymore. She was dealing with a sociopath who had been orchestrating her destruction for months, maybe longer. Every fight they'd had, every moment of distance she'd felt, every instinct that told her something was wrong, it had all been part of Jack's elaborate plan to manipulate her into leaving their marriage on terms that would benefit him financially. The man she had loved, the father of her unborn child, had never existed at all. He was a carefully constructed persona designed to control her, and she had fallen for it completely. Madison placed her hand on her belly and made a promise to her unborn child. "I won't let him destroy us. I don't know how yet, but I'm going to find a way to fight back." She had been naive and trusting, but she wasn't stupid. Jack thought he was the only one who knew how to play chess, but he was about to learn that his wife had been paying attention to his strategies for 5 years. The game was just beginning. The next morning, Madison decided to take control of her situation before attending what would undoubtedly be a futile marriage counseling session with Jack. She had spent the night researching divorce attorneys online and had scheduled a consultation with Ryan Cross, a college friend who had become one of Los Angeles's most successful family law attorneys. But first, she needed to understand exactly what she was up against financially. The security footage had shown Jack discussing offshore accounts and asset transfers, but Madison had never paid much attention to their finances during their marriage. Jack had always handled the money, claiming it was too complicated for her to worry about and that her job was to focus on being the perfect wife and future mother. She had credit cards for daily expenses and a small personal account for incidental purchases, but the bulk of their wealth had always been managed by Jack's financial advisors and accountants. Madison had signed documents over the years without reading them carefully, trusting her husband to handle their financial affairs in their mutual best interest. Now, sitting at her laptop in the kitchen, she began to understand just how thoroughly Jack had isolated her from their assets. She logged into their primary joint checking account, the one they used for household expenses, mortgage payments, and her personal spending, and felt her heart stop. The balance showed $2,317. This account typically held at least $50,000 for monthly expenses, the mortgage on their 8,000 square foot home, utilities, food, Madison's personal spending, and miscellaneous household costs. Even with their extravagant lifestyle, $50,000 a month had always been more than enough to cover everything. Panicking, Madison tried to access their savings accounts and investment portfolios, but discovered that every password had been changed. Her login credentials were invalid across the board. Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Merrill Lynch, even their cryptocurrency accounts that Jack had insisted on opening last year. She grabbed her purse and headed to their bank, hoping to get answers in person. The drive to Beverly Hills usually took 20 minutes, but today it felt like hours, as Madison's mind raced with possibilities. Maybe there was a simple explanation. Maybe the accounts had been temporarily frozen for security reasons after the TikTok scandal. Maybe Jack really had moved money for tax purposes and simply forgotten to tell her. But when she arrived at the marble and glass headquarters of their private banking division, the manager delivered devastating news with the apologetic tone of someone who had clearly been briefed on her situation. "Mrs. Sterling, I'm so sorry, but your husband removed your name from all the accounts last week. He said it was for tax planning purposes related to Sterling Tech's initial public offering. According to our records, you no longer have access to any of the Sterling family accounts." Madison felt the room spinning around her as she tried to process this information. "But I'm his wife. These are marital assets. I've been making deposits and withdrawals from these accounts for 5 years." The manager, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and an expensive suit, looked genuinely uncomfortable as she explained Madison's legal position. "Mrs. Sterling, I understand how confusing this must be. However, according to our records, all of these accounts were established before your marriage and were never legally converted to joint accounts. Your name was added as an authorized user, not as an owner. Mr. Sterling has every legal right to revoke that access at any time." Madison's legs felt weak as the full implications hit her. She had never actually owned any of their money. For 5 years, she had been living off Jack's generosity, completely dependent on his willingness to provide for her. She had no legal claim to accounts that she had assumed were theirs together. "What about the house, the cars?" "Everything is in Mr. Sterling's name exclusively, ma'am. The mortgage, the car loans, the property deed. You're not listed as an owner on any of these assets." Walking back to her car on unsteady legs, Madison tried to use her American Express black card to pay for parking. Declined. She tried her Visa. Declined. Her MasterCard. Declined. Every single credit card linked to Jack's accounts had been canceled without warning. She sat in her white Tesla Model X, which she now realized was registered in Jack's name, not hers, and felt the walls of her gilded cage finally becoming visible. Her hands shaking, she called Jack's office. "Sterling Technologies, this is Jennifer. How may I help you?" "Jennifer, this is Madison Sterling. I need to speak with my husband immediately." There was a pause and Madison could hear Jennifer typing on her computer. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Sterling, but Mr. Sterling is in back-to-back meetings with the underwriters all day and cannot be disturbed. Would you like to leave a message? Tell him that all our bank accounts have been frozen and I can't access any money. This is an emergency. I'll pass along your message, Mrs. Sterling. Have a wonderful day." The line went dead, leaving Madison staring at her phone in disbelief. Jennifer had been Jack's assistant for 3 years, and she had always been warm and friendly. The coldness in her voice suggested that everyone at Sterling Tech had been briefed on Madison's new status as persona non grata. Madison drove home in a daze, only to discover that her key card no longer worked at their gated community's entrance. She had to call the security booth and practically beg them to let her into her own neighborhood. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Sterling, but Mr. Sterling contacted us this morning to revoke your access privileges. He said it was a security precaution due to the recent media attention. You'll need to call him to have your access restored." Once inside the house, Madison discovered that Jack had been thorough in his financial assault. The internet had been disconnected. The cable was off. Even the landline telephone service had been terminated. She was completely cut off from the outside world except for her cell phone, which was fortunately on her own individual plan that predated her marriage. She sat in her empty mansion, 7 months pregnant, with less than $100 in cash and no access to any of their shared resources. Everything she had taken for granted, the security, the lifestyle, the safety net that wealth provided, had evaporated overnight. Her phone rang, and Sophia's name appeared on the screen. "Madison, what's going on? I tried to call the house and the number was disconnected. I also saw some weird charges on your shared Netflix account before it was canceled." Through tears, Madison explained everything she had discovered. The security footage of Jack and Amber planning her destruction, the emptied bank accounts, the canceled credit cards, the realization that her entire marriage had been built on manipulation and financial control. "Madison, you need to get out of that house right now," Sophia said urgently. "Come stay with me while we figure this out. Jack is clearly capable of much worse than we imagine." "I can't just leave, Sophia. This is my home. I'm 7 months pregnant. Where else am I going to go?" "Madison, listen to me very carefully. That house belongs to Jack, not you. Those accounts never belong to you. The cars, the furniture, the jewelry. Legally, none of it is yours. If Jack can manipulate financial institutions this easily, what else is he planning?" But Madison was already spiraling into despair. How had she been so blind? How had she allowed herself to become so completely dependent on a man who saw her as nothing more than an obstacle to his wealth and freedom? She walked through the house that had never really been hers, looking at art worth millions of dollars that she had helped select but never owned, furniture that reflected her taste but was purchased with his money, a life that looked perfect from the outside but had been a prison all along. That evening, she sat in the dark kitchen eating peanut butter sandwiches because she couldn't afford to order groceries online. The house felt enormous and oppressive around her, like a beautiful mausoleum designed to showcase her powerlessness. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. The message contained a single photo: Jack and Amber at Mastro's, one of Beverly Hills' most expensive steakhouses, champagne glasses raised in celebration. Amber was wearing a diamond tennis bracelet that Madison recognized immediately. It had been her anniversary gift from Jack just 6 months earlier. Below the photo was a message: "Thanks for the bracelet. Jack says it looks better on me anyway. Don't worry, you'll be out of our lives soon enough. Tut im." Madison stared at the message and felt something fundamental shift inside her. The grief and self-pity that had been consuming her for days was being replaced by something harder and more dangerous: rage. Jack thought she was soft and controllable. He thought she would crumble under financial pressure and quietly accept whatever scraps he decided to throw her way. He believed that 5 years of isolation and manipulation had broken her spirit completely. He had no idea who he was really dealing with. Madison Torres had graduated summa cum laude from UCLA with a marketing degree. She had built million-dollar advertising campaigns before she was 25. She had negotiated with Fortune 500 executives and convinced them to bet their company's futures on her strategies. Jack Sterling might have stolen her money and destroyed her marriage, but he hadn't taken her intelligence or her determination. And he was about to learn that a desperate woman with nothing left to lose could be far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. Madison deleted the taunting message and opened her laptop. If Jack wanted to play dirty, she was about to show him that she had been learning from the best teacher possible: him. Madison's meeting with Ryan Cross took place in a small coffee shop in Santa Monica. Far from the usual haunts of Beverly Hills, where she might be recognized by gossip bloggers or paparazzi still following her story. She had chosen her outfit carefully, a simple black maternity dress that showed her pregnancy without seeming to exploit it for sympathy, minimal makeup that couldn't hide her exhaustion but suggested dignity under pressure, and her wedding ring prominently displayed on her finger. Ryan hadn't changed much since their college days at UCLA. He was still tall and lean, with sandy brown hair and the same easy smile that had made him popular in their business classes together. But now he wore a perfectly tailored Armani suit and carried himself with the confident bearing of someone who had built a formidable reputation in Los Angeles family law by representing celebrities, athletes, and tech executives in their most expensive divorces. "Madison," he said, standing to embrace her gently when she arrived. "I'm so sorry about everything you're going through. I saw the news coverage, and I can't imagine how difficult this must be." She had called Ryan 2 days earlier, briefly explaining her situation after finding his contact information through their UCLA alumni network. He had agreed to meet despite his busy schedule, both as a favor to an old friend and because high-profile cases like this one could make or break careers in family law. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice," Madison said as they sat down at a corner table away from other customers. "I didn't know who else to turn to. Most of the attorneys I contacted either wanted retainers I can't afford or had conflicts of interest because they've worked with Jack's companies." Ryan pulled out a leather portfolio and expensive pen, his expression becoming more serious as he shifted into professional mode. "Before we begin, I need to be completely transparent with you about my fees. My standard rate is $800 per hour, and a case like this could easily require hundreds of hours of work. However, given our history and the circumstances, I'm willing to work on a contingency basis. I'll take 30% of any settlement we recover, but only if we win." Madison felt a surge of relief. At least she wouldn't have to pay legal fees up front with money she didn't have. "Now," Ryan continued, "tell me everything. And I mean everything, Madison. The smallest details could matter in a case like this. Start from the beginning and don't leave anything out." For the next 90 minutes, Madison laid out the full story of her marriage's destruction. Ryan took notes steadily, occasionally asking clarifying questions that demonstrated his expertise in high-asset divorce cases. She told him about the gradual isolation from her friends and family, the way Jack had convinced her to quit her career and become financially dependent on him. She described the months of emotional distance that had preceded the discovery of his affair, the viral TikTok that had exposed his relationship with Amber Hayes, and his manipulative reconciliation attempt. When she got to the security footage she had discovered, Ryan's pen stopped moving, and he looked up with sharp interest. "Do you still have access to that footage?" "I deleted the app from my phone, but the videos should still be stored on the cloud server. Jack doesn't know I ever saw them." "That's crucial evidence, Madison. Video of Jack planning to frame you for instability while conspiring with his mistress could void your prenup completely." Madison pulled out a printed copy of the prenuptial agreement she had signed 5 years earlier. She had found it in Jack's home office the night before, buried in a file cabinet she had never thought to look through. Reading it as an adult woman facing divorce was vastly different from signing it as a lovesick 23-year-old who believed her fairy tale would last forever. Ryan studied the document carefully, his expression growing more serious with each page. The agreement was comprehensive and heavily skewed in Jack's favor, clearly drafted by expensive attorneys who specialized in protecting wealthy men's assets from their wives. "Madison, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. This prenup is extremely thorough and heavily weighted against you. Jack's legal team did their job very well. In the event of divorce, you would receive a lump sum of $5 million and nothing else. No ongoing support, no claim to appreciated assets, no stock options from Sterling Tech, no portion of the house or other property." Madison felt her heart sink. $5 million sounded like a fortune to most people, but after 5 years of marriage to a soon-to-be billionaire, it felt like an insult. More importantly, it wouldn't be enough to maintain even a modest lifestyle for herself and her child in Los Angeles. "However," Ryan continued, flipping to the final pages of the agreement, "there are some potential avenues we can explore. The prenup includes what's called a morals clause. If either party engages in behavior that brings public scandal or disgrace to the marriage, the wrong party can void the financial terms and pursue a standard equitable distribution of assets. A morals clause. It's not uncommon in high net worth marriages, especially when one spouse has a public profile. Basically, if Jack engaged in adultery, criminal behavior, or other conduct that damaged your family's reputation, you could potentially void this prenup and claim 50% of all marital assets. Madison felt the first flicker of genuine hope she had experienced in days. The TikTok video definitely brought public scandal. There were memes about our marriage all over social media. Absolutely. And if we can prove that Jack conspired with Amber to manipulate you into filing for divorce while hiding assets, that could constitute fraud, which would also void the prenup entirely. Ryan leaned forward, his expression becoming more intense as he warmed to the legal strategy. Madison, I need you to understand something. Jack Sterling and his legal team are not going to make this easy. They have unlimited resources, decades of experience in these kinds of cases, and a very strong motivation to minimize any settlement. This is going to be a war, and wars are expensive, brutal, and unpredictable. Are you prepared for that level of conflict? Madison thought about the security footage of her husband toasting with his mistress while planning her financial destruction. She remembered the emptied bank accounts, the canceled credit cards, the casual cruelty of using her pregnancy as a weapon against her. I'm ready, she said quietly. What do I need to do? First, we need to secure that security footage before Jack realizes it exists and has it deleted. Second, we need to start building a comprehensive paper trail of his financial manipulation and asset hiding. Third, and most importantly, we need allies. What kind of allies? Ryan smiled grimly, and Madison caught a glimpse of why he had become so successful in such a competitive field. Jack Sterling didn't build a billion-dollar company by being nice to people. He's made enemies along the way. Business rivals, former employees he screwed over, investors who've been burned by his deals. We need to find those people and see what they know about his business practices. As if summoned by Ryan's words, Madison's phone rang. The caller ID showed a name that made her blood run cold. Marcus King. She recognized him as Jack's biggest business rival, the CEO of a competing tech company who had been featured in several Forbes articles about their corporate feuds. Answer it, Ryan said immediately, his eyes lighting up with interest. And put it on speaker. Madison's hand trembled as she accepted the call. Hello? Madison Sterling? This is Marcus King. I think we need to talk. Ryan raised his eyebrows and gestured enthusiastically for Madison to continue the conversation. Mr. King, I'm not sure what we would have to discuss. I saw the news about your husband's affair, Marcus interrupted, his deep voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. I also know quite a bit about some of his business practices that the SEC might find very interesting. If you're planning to divorce him, and I suspect you are, I might be able to help you in ways that would benefit both of us. Madison felt her pulse quicken. This was exactly the kind of opportunity Ryan had been describing. What kind of help? The kind that could expose Jack Sterling for the fraud he really is. But we need to meet in person to discuss details. Are you free this afternoon? Madison looked at Ryan, who was nodding so enthusiastically she thought his head might fall off. Yes, she said. I'm free. Excellent. Do you know the Beverly Hills Hotel? Meet me in the Polo Lounge at 4 o'clock. Come alone, but bring someone you trust to wait nearby in case you need backup. After she hung up, Ryan was grinning like a predator who had just spotted wounded prey. Madison, I think your luck is about to change dramatically. Marcus King has been trying to bring down Jack Sterling for years, both in business and personally. If he has evidence of securities fraud or other financial crimes, Jack's IPO could be in serious jeopardy. For the first time since discovering Jack's betrayal, Madison felt like she might actually have a chance at fighting back effectively. She had legal representation, potential evidence of criminal behavior, and now a powerful ally who had his own reasons for wanting to destroy her husband. Jack had underestimated her once by assuming she would crumble under pressure. She was going to make sure he never got the chance to make that mistake again. The war was just beginning, and Madison Torres Sterling was no longer fighting alone. The Beverly Hills Hotel's Polo Lounge had been a gathering place for Hollywood power brokers and business titans for decades. its green leather banquettes and pink tablecloths providing a discreet setting for deals that shaped industries and destroyed careers. Madison arrived 10 minutes early, her nerves jangling as she tried to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. Ryan had insisted on coming with her, despite Marcus King's request that she come alone. He sat at the bar nursing a scotch and reading the Wall Street Journal, close enough to intervene if needed, but far enough away to maintain the illusion that Madison was unaccompanied. Marcus King was not what Madison had imagined when she pictured Jack's notorious business rival. Instead of the ruthless corporate shark she had expected, she found a distinguished man in his early 50s, with salt and pepper hair, kind blue eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and the bearing of someone who had earned his success through intelligence rather than manipulation. He stood when Madison approached his corner booth, greeting her with genuine warmth that seemed surprising given the circumstances of their meeting. "Mrs. Sterling, thank you for coming. I know this must be an incredibly difficult time for you." Marcus had ordered afternoon tea, and the elegant spread of pastries, finger sandwiches, and delicate china felt surreal given the gravity of their conversation. He gestured for Madison to sit across from him, his manner more that of a concerned father figure than a business adversary. "I want to start by saying how sorry I am for what you're going through," Marcus said, his voice carrying genuine sympathy. "I've known Jack Sterling for over 15 years, and while we've been fierce competitors, I've never wished personal pain on him or his family. What he's done to you is unconscionable, both as a husband and as a human being." Madison appreciated the sentiment, but she was eager to understand what Marcus could offer beyond emotional support. "Mr. King, on the phone you mentioned something about the SEC and Jack's business practices." Marcus nodded gravely and pulled a thick manila folder from his briefcase, placing it on the table between them. "I've been investigating Sterling Tech's operations for years, initially just trying to find legitimate competitive advantages. What I discovered was far worse than normal corporate rivalry." He opened the folder to reveal hundreds of pages of financial documents, emails, and legal filings. Jack Sterling has been systematically manipulating Sterling Tech's financial reports for at least 3 years, inflating user engagement numbers, hiding massive losses in subsidiary companies, backdating stock options for executives, and misrepresenting revenue streams to investors. Ryan had moved closer to their table, pretending to read his newspaper while actually listening to every word of their conversation. "Do you have concrete proof of these allegations?" Madison asked, her heart racing as she realized the potential implications. "I have emails from former Sterling Tech employees who were fired for questioning these practices," Marcus replied, pulling out a stack of printed communications. "I have financial documents that were leaked to me by whistleblowers inside the company. Most importantly, I have Jack's former chief financial officer, David Chen, who's willing to testify about everything he witnessed in exchange for immunity from prosecution." Madison's hands trembled as she looked through the evidence. The documents painted a picture of systematic fraud that went far beyond creative accounting. Sterling Tech had been cooking its books on a massive scale, presenting fictional numbers to investors while hiding debts and losses that would have made the company essentially worthless. "What does this mean for the IPO?" she asked. Marcus's expression darkened. "It means that Sterling Tech's initial public offering next week is based entirely on fraudulent financial information. When this comes out, and it will come out very soon, the company will collapse overnight. Jack will lose everything: his wealth, his reputation, his freedom." Madison felt a surge of emotions. Satisfaction at the thought of Jack facing consequences for his actions, but also fear about what this might mean for her own financial settlement. "Mr. King, I need to ask you directly. What do you want in return for this information? What's your motivation for helping me?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying Madison carefully before responding. "I want Jack Sterling to face justice for his crimes. Not just his personal betrayal of you, but his criminal betrayal of investors, employees, and the market itself. He's stolen millions of dollars from pension funds and retirement accounts through his fraudulent reporting." He pulled out another document and slid it across to Madison. "This is a sworn affidavit from David Chen detailing the financial fraud. If you file this along with your divorce papers, citing the morals clause in your prenuptial agreement, it will trigger an immediate SEC investigation that could bring down Jack's entire criminal enterprise." Madison looked at the affidavit, her mind racing through the implications. Filing these documents wouldn't just end her marriage. It would likely end Jack's freedom as well. "There's something else you need to know," Marcus continued quietly. "Jack has been using Sterling Tech's corporate credit lines to fund his personal lifestyle, including his relationship with Amber Hayes. That's not just adultery, it's embezzlement, which is a federal crime punishable by up to 20 years in prison." The weight of Marcus's revelation settled over Madison like a blanket. Jack wasn't just a cheating husband. He was a criminal who had been stealing from his own company to finance his affair. "What exactly do you need me to do?" she asked. Marcus smiled for the first time since their conversation began. "File for divorce tomorrow morning, making sure to cite the morals clause and include David Chen's affidavit as evidence of Jack's criminal behavior. My contacts at the Securities and Exchange Commission will file formal charges within hours of your filing." He pulled out a business card and handed it to Madison. "This is Patricia Williams, the best forensic accountant in California. She's already agreed to work on your case pro bono because she's disgusted by what Jack has done to Sterling Tech's investors." Madison looked at the card, feeling overwhelmed by the magnitude of what Marcus was proposing. "This feels like more than just helping me with my divorce. This feels like you're asking me to destroy Jack's entire life." "Madison," Marcus said gently, "Jack Sterling destroyed his own life the moment he decided to commit securities fraud. He destroyed your marriage when he chose to have an affair while you were carrying his child. All I'm asking you to do is tell the truth about who he really is." That evening, Madison sat in Sophia's small apartment in West Hollywood, staring at the divorce papers Ryan had prepared based on their meeting with Marcus King. Her sister sat beside her on the worn couch, holding her hand while Madison wrestled with the decision that would change everything. "Are you sure about this?" Sophia asked softly. "Once you file these papers, there's no going back. Jack will know you've discovered everything, and he'll fight you with everything he has." Madison thought about her unborn child, about the kind of man Jack had revealed himself to be, about the life of lies and criminal behavior she would be condemning her baby to if she stayed silent. "I'm sure," she said, signing her name with strokes that grew steadier with each letter. The next morning at 9 a.m. sharp, Ryan filed the divorce papers at the Los Angeles County Superior Court. By noon, the story was breaking on financial news networks across the country. Sterling Tech CEO Jack Sterling named an explosive divorce filing, citing securities fraud and embezzlement just days before company IPO. Madison watched the coverage from Sophia's living room, her hand resting protectively on her belly. She felt terrified but also exhilarated. For the first time in her marriage, she was the one making strategic moves instead of simply reacting to Jack's manipulation. Her phone rang constantly throughout the day, reporters seeking comments, Jack's attorneys demanding retractions, former friends choosing sides. But she ignored them all. She had said everything she needed to say in the meticulously documented court filings. By evening, Sterling Tech's stock price in pre-market trading had dropped by 40%. The Securities and Exchange Commission announced they were reviewing the company's IPO application with heightened scrutiny. Banking regulators froze Sterling Tech's credit lines pending investigation. And Jack Sterling, the man who had tried to destroy her, was finally facing the consequences of his criminal actions. But Madison had no idea that her apparent victory was about to turn into her greatest nightmare, and that Jack Sterling had one final, devastating card left to play. Madison woke up in Sophia's guest room to the sound of her phone buzzing incessantly on the nightstand. Sunlight streamed through the thin curtains of her sister's modest West Hollywood apartment, a sharp contrast to the floor-to-ceiling windows and ocean views she had grown accustomed to in Malibu. She had filed for divorce just 24 hours ago, and already the world felt like a completely different place. She reached for her phone and saw dozens of missed calls from reporters, attorneys, and numbers she didn't recognize. But the most recent notification made her blood run cold. Sterling Tech IPO officially suspended. CEO Jack Sterling to hold emergency press conference at 2 p.m. Stock trading halted indefinitely. Madison quickly turned on the television to find Jack already dominating every financial news channel. CNBC was running a banner headline: "Sterling Tech collapse, fraud allegations rock Silicon Valley." Bloomberg showed footage of FBI agents arriving at Sterling Tech headquarters with boxes of evidence. Fox Business was interviewing former employees who claimed they had been pressuring to falsify reports for years. Everything was happening exactly as Marcus King had predicted, perhaps even faster than he had expected. Jack's criminal empire was crumbling in real time, and Madison found herself at the center of the story that would define Silicon Valley scandal for years to come. Her phone rang, and Ryan's name appeared on the screen. Something in his tone immediately set off alarm bells in Madison's mind. "Madison, we need to talk. Now. Can you meet me at my office immediately?" "What's wrong? I thought everything was going according to plan." "Just get here as quickly as you can. And Madison, don't talk to any reporters, don't answer calls from unknown numbers, and don't trust anyone who approaches you claiming to be on your side." An hour later, Madison sat in Ryan's glass-walled conference room, watching him pace back and forth with an agitation she had never seen in him before. He had always been calm and collected, even during their most stressful college exams. This version of Ryan was making her genuinely nervous. "Okay," she said finally, her voice strained. "What's going on? You're scaring me." Ryan stopped pacing and turned to face her, his expression grim. "Madison, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Have you had any contact with Marcus King outside of our meeting yesterday?" Madison frowned, confused by the question. "No, of course not. Yesterday was the first time I'd ever spoken to him. Why?" Ryan pulled out his laptop and turned it toward her. On the screen was a news article from the Wall Street Journal with a headline that made Madison's heart stop. "Sterling Tech divorce drama reveals alleged victim may have conspired with business rival to manipulate stock price." "What is this?" Madison whispered, her voice barely audible. "This morning, Jack's legal team released a comprehensive statement claiming that your divorce filing was part of a coordinated attack on Sterling Tech, orchestrated by Marcus King. They're saying you were working with him for months to damage the company's IPO and profit from its stock decline." Madison felt the room spinning around her as Ryan clicked to another browser tab, revealing a series of text messages displayed as evidence in what appeared to be a legal filing. Madison recognized her own phone number, but the messages were completely foreign to her. "Marcus, the timing is perfect. Jack suspects nothing about our plan. Once I file the divorce papers with the fraud allegations, your contacts at the SEC can move in for the kill. Perfect. My short positions on Sterling Tech will make me $50 million when the stock crashes. Your cut of the profits will be in your Cayman Islands account by Friday, as promised." I can't wait to see the look on Jack's face when he realizes his own wife destroyed him. This is better than any divorce settlement I could have gotten through normal channels. Madison stared at the messages in complete horror. "Ryan, I never sent these. I don't even have Marcus King's phone number, and I certainly don't have any Cayman Islands bank accounts. I know you didn't send them, but someone did send them from your phone number, and there's more evidence that's even more damaging." Ryan showed her banking records indicating that Madison had received a $500,000 deposit from one of Marcus King's shell companies 2 weeks ago, along with email communications discussing their partnership in bringing down Sterling Tech. "This is impossible," Madison said, her voice rising with panic. "I told you, Jack cut off all my access to money. I have less than $100 in my personal account. I've never seen any of these bank records before." "The account is in your maiden name at a small private bank in the Cayman Islands. According to these records, it was opened 3 months ago with your social security number and a copy of your passport." Madison felt like she was trapped in a nightmare that kept getting worse with every revelation. Someone had been setting her up for months, creating an elaborate false trail of evidence that painted her as a co-conspirator in Marcus King's alleged scheme to manipulate Sterling Tech's stock price and profit from its collapse. "Ryan, you have to believe me. I had nothing to do with any of this. I've never spoken to Marcus King before yesterday. I don't know anything about stock manipulation, and I certainly don't have offshore bank accounts." "I believe you, Madison, but it doesn't matter what I believe anymore. Jack's legal team has filed criminal charges against you for securities fraud, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and market manipulation. There's already a federal warrant out for your arrest." Before Madison could respond, her phone rang. Marcus King's name appeared on the screen, and Ryan immediately gestured for her not to answer. But Madison was already reaching for the phone. She needed answers, and she needed them now. "Madison," Marcus's voice was tight with barely controlled panic, We have a major problem. Someone leaked recordings of our conversation yesterday to Jack's attorneys. They're claiming we've been working together for months to manipulate Sterling Tech's stock price. Marcus, please tell me you didn't create fake text messages and bank accounts in my name. There was a long, damning pause before Marcus responded. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with guilt and regret. Madison, I need you to listen to me very carefully. This whole situation was a setup from the very beginning. Jack Sterling knew we were going to meet. In fact, he's the one who orchestrated our introduction. Madison felt her world collapsing for the second time in as many days. What are you talking about? Jack Sterling approached me 6 months ago with a proposition that I should have refused immediately. He said his marriage was in trouble and that he needed a way to discredit you completely in preparation for a divorce that would minimize his financial exposure. The conference room went completely silent, except for the sound of Madison's heart pounding in her ears and Ryan's furious note-taking. He offered me detailed inside information about Sterling Tech's actual financial condition, information that would allow me to profit enormously by shorting the stock before the fraud was exposed publicly. In exchange, I was supposed to approach you with evidence of his crimes and convince you to file for divorce in a way that would make you look like a gold-digging conspirator. Madison closed her eyes, feeling the full weight of her husband's sociopathic manipulation crashing over her like a tsunami. So everything yesterday was fake? The evidence? The concern for justice? No, the evidence against Jack is completely real. Sterling Tech really is built on massive fraud, and Jack really has been embezzling company funds to pay for his lifestyle with Amber Hayes. But Jack knew I would eventually approach you with this information because he's been feeding it to me gradually over the past 6 months. Ryan was frantically scribbling notes, his face pale with shock at the scope of Jack's deception. He's been using me to frame you while simultaneously using your divorce filing to distract from his real crimes, Marcus continued. The SEC investigation that was supposed to destroy him? He's already cut a deal with federal prosecutors. He's going to testify that we conspired together to manipulate his company's stock price in exchange for immunity from the fraud charges. Madison opened her eyes and looked at Ryan, who was shaking his head in disbelief. How is that possible? Because Jack Sterling is smarter and more ruthless than either of us gave him credit for, Marcus replied. He's been planning this for months, maybe longer. He knew his fraud would eventually be discovered, so he created a narrative where you and I are the villains who destroyed an innocent company for profit. The full picture was becoming clear, and it was more horrifying than Madison could have imagined. Jack had orchestrated every aspect of her downfall, from the affair that destroyed her emotionally to the financial manipulation that left her powerless, culminating in a criminal frame-up that would send her to prison while he walked free. The FBI is coming for both of us, Marcus continued, his voice heavy with regret. They have search warrants for our homes and offices. Jack has convinced them that we've been running an elaborate conspiracy for months. Madison looked up at Ryan, who was already reaching for his phone to call his contacts in the federal prosecutor's office. We need to get you out of Los Angeles immediately, he said, before they arrest you and before this gets any worse. But it was already too late. Through the conference room's floor-to-ceiling windows, Madison could see black SUVs pulling up in front of Ryan's building, their tinted windows and government plates unmistakable. Jack Sterling had won again, and this time he had played the game so brilliantly that Madison was facing federal prison while he emerged as the victim of her alleged crimes. The Los Angeles County Federal Detention Center was a concrete monument to human misery, and Madison Torres Sterling was learning firsthand why wealthy people would pay any amount of money to avoid ending up there. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead 24 hours a day, casting a sickly pallor over everything and everyone. The air smelled of industrial disinfectant, unwashed bodies, and the distinctive odor of institutional food that had been reheated too many times. Madison sat on a narrow metal bench in an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on her 8-month pregnant frame, her hands cuffed to a chain around her waist. The booking process had been deliberately humiliating, stripped, searched, photographed, fingerprinted, and processed like a piece of meat through a bureaucratic machine designed to break the spirit of anyone who entered. Her mugshot had been leaked to the media within hours, and now her face was plastered across every news outlet in the country. The headlines were brutal and unforgiving. Pregnant gold digger arrested for securities fraud. Tech billionaire's wife conspired to destroy husband's company. The Black Widow of Silicon Valley, how Madison Sterling almost brought down a billion-dollar empire. Entertainment Tonight had run a special segment comparing her to other notorious wives who had allegedly destroyed their husbands. From Bonnie Parker to Madison Sterling, when love turns criminal. Social media was flooded with memes mocking her pregnancy, her appearance in the mugshot, and her spectacular fall from grace. The irony was devastating and perfectly calculated. Madison had been denied bail despite being 8 months pregnant because federal prosecutors argued she was a flight risk with extensive international connections and hidden assets. The woman who couldn't afford groceries was apparently so dangerous and well-funded that she posed a national security threat. Ryan visited her every day, but the news was consistently bad. Jack's legal team had built what appeared to be an airtight case against her, complete with months of fabricated evidence that painted her as the mastermind of an elaborate conspiracy to manipulate Sterling Tech's stock price. The prosecution is offering a plea deal, Ryan said during their latest meeting in the prison's sterile visiting room. 12 years in federal prison, eligible for parole in 6 years if you cooperate fully and testify against Marcus King. Madison laughed bitterly, the sound echoing off the concrete walls. 12 years for crimes I didn't commit. What's the alternative if I go to trial? Ryan's expression was grim as he delivered the devastating news. 25 years to life, Madison. The government is treating this as a case of domestic terrorism because of the potential impact on financial markets. They're saying your actions could have triggered a broader economic collapse. Madison looked around the visiting room at other inmates and their families having similar conversations. Desperation was the common denominator in every face she saw. Mothers separated from their children, wives abandoned by husbands who couldn't handle the stigma of loving a convicted felon. What about the baby? What happens when she's born? Ryan's voice softened with genuine sympathy. Child Protective Services will take custody immediately after birth. Given your legal situation and Sophia's background, they're unlikely to approve her for kinship placement. Madison's heart shattered into pieces. Sophia had been arrested for minor drug possession in college, charges that were eventually dropped, but it would still show up in background checks and make her unsuitable as a guardian in the eyes of family court. So Jack gets everything? The money, the freedom, and our daughter? Madison, I hate to say this, but Jack's legal team has already filed for emergency custody. They're arguing that your criminal behavior makes you an unfit mother, and that the baby would be better off in his care. The visiting room felt like it was spinning around Madison as the full scope of her husband's victory became clear. He hadn't just framed her for federal crimes and stolen all their assets. He was ensuring that she would lose custody of their child, leaving him free to raise the baby with Amber Hayes as one perfectly happy family while Madison rotted in federal prison. That night, Madison lay on her narrow bunk in the cell she shared with 2 other women, a meth dealer named Crystal and a check forger named Diana, who had become something like protective older sisters despite their own problems. The baby kicked constantly now, as if she knew she was running out of time in the only safe place she would know for the foreseeable future. Madison pressed her hands to her swollen belly and whispered apologies to her unborn daughter. "I'm so sorry, little angel. I tried to protect us, but I wasn't smart enough to see what your father was really planning. I hope someday you'll understand that I never stopped loving you, even when the whole world believed I was a monster." The next morning brought news that made Madison's situation even worse. Jack had held another press conference, this time flanked by Amber Hayes, who was now openly identified as his fiancée and the woman who had helped expose Madison's alleged crimes. "I want to thank the FBI and federal prosecutors for their diligent work in uncovering this conspiracy," Jack said, standing behind a podium at Sterling Tech headquarters with Amber's hand resting supportively on his arm. "Learning that my wife was working with my business rivals to destroy our company has been heartbreaking, but I'm grateful that justice is being served." Amber looked radiant and victorious in a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She had styled herself as the innocent girlfriend who had accidentally uncovered Madison's criminal conspiracy, the good woman who had saved Jack from his evil wife's machinations. "Madison's actions didn't just hurt me personally," Jack continued, his voice breaking with perfectly calculated emotion. "She put thousands of jobs at risk. threatened the retirement savings of millions of Americans, and violated the trust that investors place in our financial markets. I hope her prosecution sends a message that no one is above the law, regardless of their personal relationship to the accused. The reporters ate it up completely. Questions flew about Jack's recovery from Madison's betrayal, his plans for Sterling Tech's future, and his upcoming marriage to Amber. In Jack's version of events, he was the brilliant entrepreneur who had been victimized by his sociopathic wife and saved by the love of a good woman who had helped the FBI uncover the truth. Madison watched the coverage from the prison's common room and felt the last piece of her spirit break. She had lost everything: her freedom, her reputation, her child's future, and now even the truth itself had been stolen from her and weaponized against her. "That's some cold shit right there," Crystal said, sitting down next to Madison on the plastic bench. "Your old man really did a number on you." Madison nodded, too emotionally exhausted to cry anymore. "I don't understand how someone can be that evil. How do you destroy the person you're supposed to love most?" "Honey," Diana said from Madison's other side, "some people ain't got souls. They just wear human faces and pretend to feel things until they don't need to pretend anymore." That afternoon, Madison received an unexpected visitor. Sophia sat across from her in the visiting room, tears streaming down her face as she tried to hold herself together. "Madison, I've been trying to raise money for a better legal defense, but Jack's attorney sent me a cease and desist letter. They're threatening to sue me for defamation if I keep claiming your innocence publicly." Madison nodded numbly. Even her sister was being silenced by Jack's legal machine. "There's something else," Sophia continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Child Protective Services came to interview me about taking the baby. They made it clear that between my old arrest record and my limited financial resources, I'm not considered a suitable guardian." Madison closed her eyes and felt the final door slam shut on her hopes. "So she'll go to Jack." "I'm sorry, Madison. I tried everything I could think of, but the system is designed to favor wealthy, connected people like Jack. Even with everything he's done, he looks better on paper than I do." That night, Madison sat in her cell and wrote a letter to her unborn daughter, knowing it would probably be the only communication they would ever have. She poured her heart onto the paper, explaining everything that had happened, professing her endless love, and begging for forgiveness for failing to protect them both from Jack's cruelty. She wrote about the dreams she had had for their life together, the bedtime stories she had planned to tell, the way she had imagined teaching her daughter to be strong and independent, and never to trust anyone who tried to make her feel small or powerless. "Your father is a monster," Madison wrote, "but you don't have to become one too. Somewhere inside you is the best part of both of us, and I hope that part is strong enough to overcome whatever poison he tries to feed you about me." As she sealed the letter, Madison realized that Jack Sterling had achieved something close to the perfect crime. He had destroyed her completely while positioning himself as the victim of her alleged conspiracy. He had stolen her money, her freedom, her reputation, her child, and even her truth. But sometimes when you have absolutely nothing left to lose, that's when you become the most dangerous person in the room. And Madison Torres Sterling was about to discover that rock bottom could be a surprisingly solid foundation for fighting back. The game wasn't over yet. Madison had been in federal detention for 3 weeks when Sophia arrived for what appeared to be a routine visit, but her sister's eyes held something Madison hadn't seen in months: hope mixed with desperate urgency. "Madison, you need to listen to me very carefully," Sophia whispered across the visiting room table, glancing nervously at the guards posted around the room. "I've been investigating on my own, and I found something that changes everything." Sophia had spent every day since Madison's arrest working like a detective, following leads that the overwhelmed public defender had missed. She had maxed out her credit cards, hiring a private investigator, a forensic accountant, and a technology expert who specialized in digital evidence recovery. "Remember how you said you deleted that security app from your phone? Well, the footage wasn't just stored on Jack's cloud account. Because you were listed as an authorized user on your home system, everything was automatically backed up to your personal iCloud account that you set up years before you got married." Madison's heart began racing for the first time in weeks. "You mean we still have the original videos of Jack and Amber planning this whole thing?" "Better than that," Sophia said, pulling out a small recording device concealed in her purse. I managed to get into Jack and Amber's engagement party last week. Security was tight, but I convinced them I was a freelance photographer hired to document the event. Madison listened in amazement as Sophia explained how she had posed as wedding media, complete with fake credentials and professional camera equipment, to gain access to the private celebration at the Beverly Hills Hotel. I couldn't get close enough to Jack for most of the evening, but toward the end of the night, when everyone was drunk and celebrating, I heard him bragging to a group of his investors about how brilliantly he had handled his Madison problem. Sophia activated the recording device, and Madison heard her husband's voice clearly through the tiny speaker. The whole thing was genius, really. Madison thought she was so smart with her little marketing background, but she walked right into every trap I set for her. The security footage, the meeting with Marcus King, even the fake bank accounts. She never suspected I was orchestrating everything from the beginning. Amber's distinctive laughter followed, and Madison recognized the cruel edge that had haunted her nightmares. I still can't believe she fell for your reconciliation performance. You should have seen her face when you swore on the baby's life that I meant nothing to you. Huh. The best part, Jack's voice continued, is that she's going to federal prison for my crimes, while I get to keep all the money and raise our kid with you. By the time she gets out, if she ever gets out, our daughter won't even remember her. Madison's hands were shaking as she listened to her husband casually confessing to framing her for federal crimes. There's more, Sophia whispered, fast-forwarding through the recording. Listen to this part where he explains exactly how he manipulated the evidence. Jack's voice came through the speaker again, even clearer this time. Marcus King was the perfect patsy because he actually believed he was helping Madison fight back against me. I fed him real evidence about Sterling Tech's financial problems over several months, knowing he would eventually approach her with it when our marriage fell apart publicly. Shukranartum. The recording continued with Jack detailing how he had planted the fake text messages on Madison's phone using spyware he had installed months earlier, created the offshore bank accounts using her personal information, and even bribed officials at the detention center to ensure her bail was denied. The SEC thinks they're prosecuting a criminal conspiracy, but I'm the one who gave them all their evidence. I played them almost as perfectly as I played Madison. Madison felt the first genuine spark of hope she had experienced since her arrest. This recording was a full confession to multiple federal crimes, including perjury, obstruction of justice, wire fraud, and conspiracy. But Sophia wasn't finished with her revelations. Ryan's been working around the clock since you were arrested. He found something in Jack's financial records that proves he's been planning this for over a year. She explained how Ryan had subpoenaed Jack's personal banking records and discovered payments to private investigators, technology experts, and even legal consultants specializing in federal criminal defense, all dating back to before Madison had any idea about the affair. He's been paying for advice on how to frame you while making himself look like the victim. There are emails going back 14 months where he's discussing strategies for neutralizing Madison's divorce claims through criminal prosecution. The next day, Ryan filed an emergency motion to dismiss all charges against Madison based on newly discovered evidence of prosecutorial misconduct and criminal fraud by the alleged victim. The courtroom was packed with reporters as he presented the security footage showing Jack Sterling systematically framing his pregnant wife for federal crimes. The videos were devastating. They showed Jack accessing Madison's computer to create fake communications with Marcus King, forging her signature on bank documents, and even rehearsing his fake reconciliation speech with Amber, coaching him on how to seem sincere while manipulating Madison into trusting him again. But the most shocking revelation came when Ryan played Sophia's recording of Jack's confession at the engagement party. The entire courtroom sat in the stunned silence as they listened to one of Silicon Valley's most prominent figures casually describing how he had framed his wife for federal crimes while stealing millions of dollars from his own company. "Your Honor," Ryan said, his voice ringing with righteous anger, "my client has been the victim of the most elaborate criminal conspiracy I have ever encountered. Jack Sterling didn't just commit securities fraud and embezzlement. He orchestrated a systematic campaign to destroy an innocent woman while using her as a scapegoat for his own crimes." Within hours, all charges against Madison were dropped, and new federal warrants were issued for Jack Sterling and Amber Hayes. But Jack, perhaps anticipating this possibility, had already implemented his escape plan. The final confrontation came at Van Nuys Airport, where private jets departed daily for countries without extradition treaties with the United States. Madison, now 9 months pregnant and finally free after weeks in detention, arrived with FBI agents just as Jack and Amber were preparing to board a sleek Gulfstream G650 that would take them beyond the reach of American justice. Jack looked genuinely shocked to see Madison walking toward him, flanked by federal agents. For the first time since she had known him, his carefully controlled composure completely cracked. He was no longer the confident tech mogul who could manipulate any situation to his advantage. He was a cornered criminal facing the consequences of his actions, and the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. "Madison," he said, his voice lacking any of its usual authority, "I can explain everything. This isn't what it looks like." Madison walked closer, her hands resting protectively on her 9-month pregnant belly. The contrast was stark and symbolic. Jack in an expensive suit looking desperate and defeated. Madison in simple clothes looking tired but triumphant after weeks of imprisonment for crimes she didn't commit. "You don't need to explain anything, Jack," she said, her voice steady and calm. "We heard your confession. We saw the evidence you planted. We know exactly what kind of monster you really are." The FBI agents moved efficiently, reading Jack his rights while he protested his innocence to reporters who were already broadcasting the arrest live on national television. Amber Hayes, who had been standing confidently beside the private jet just moments before, was now on her knees on the airport tarmac, pleading with federal agents not to arrest her. The carefully curated Instagram influencer persona was replaced by raw desperation as she realized her fairy tale ending had become a federal nightmare. "Please, you don't understand," Amber sobbed, her designer dress torn and her perfect makeup running down her cheeks. "He told me Madison was trying to steal his money. He said she was unstable and dangerous. I was just trying to help him protect himself and the baby." But the evidence was overwhelming. Text messages on Amber's phone revealed her active participation in the conspiracy, including her role in planting fake evidence and helping Jack manipulate Marcus King into unwittingly participating in the frame-up. As federal agents escorted Jack and Amber away in separate vehicles, Jack turned to Madison one final time, his face twisted with rage and desperation. "This isn't over, Madison. I'll fight this from prison if I have to. You'll never be free of me, and neither will our daughter. I'll make sure she knows exactly what kind of woman her mother really is." Madison looked at the man she had once loved, the father of her unborn child, and felt nothing but pity mixed with profound relief. "Jack," she said quietly, "I already am free. I've been free since the moment I realized who you really are, and our daughter will grow up knowing the truth about both of us." 3 months later, Madison gave birth to a healthy baby girl in a private hospital room, surrounded by Sophia, Ryan, and several friends who had supported her through the legal nightmare. She named her daughter Grace after her grandmother, who had always taught her that dignity and truth would ultimately triumph over lies and manipulation. Jack was awaiting trial in the same federal detention center where Madison had been held, facing charges that would likely keep him imprisoned for the rest of his life. Sterling Tech had collapsed completely, wiping out billions in investor value and leaving thousands of employees unemployed. Amber had accepted a plea deal that would put her in federal prison for 8 years, though she would likely serve less time in exchange for her cooperation in testifying against Jack. The civil lawsuit Madison filed against Jack's remaining assets had resulted in a settlement worth over $200 million, money that had been hidden in offshore accounts and recovered through international legal cooperation. She used part of the settlement to establish a foundation that provided legal aid to women facing domestic abuse and financial manipulation. But more importantly than the money, Madison had reclaimed something that no amount of wealth could buy: her sense of self-worth, her belief in her own strength, and her faith that truth would ultimately prevail over even the most sophisticated lies. As she held baby Grace for the first time and looked into her daughter's eyes, Madison whispered, "Your daddy tried to teach me that I was weak and helpless without him. But he was wrong, sweet girl. We're going to be just fine on our own." Grace opened her eyes and seemed to look directly at her mother, as if she understood every word and was ready to face the world with the same courage that had carried Madison through the darkest period of her life. The viral TikTok that had exposed Jack's affair seemed like ancient history now, a catalyst that had ultimately led to justice being served. The real victory wasn't that Amber Hayes had been humiliated, begging on an airport runway for mercy she didn't deserve. The real victory was that Madison Torres had discovered she didn't need Jack Sterling's money, his status symbols, or his approval to build an extraordinary life for herself and her daughter. She had survived his attempt to destroy her and emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. Sometimes the greatest revenge is simply refusing to be destroyed by those who underestimate your resilience. As Madison looked out the hospital window at the Los Angeles skyline, holding Grace close to her heart, she knew that her story was no longer one of betrayal and victimization. It was a story of survival, redemption, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and daughter who would face the future together, free from the lies and manipulation that had once defined their lives. Jack Sterling had boarded his private jet that day, expecting to escape to a life of luxury and freedom with his mistress. Instead, he had found himself in federal custody, facing decades in prison for the crimes he had committed in his obsessive quest to destroy the woman who had loved him. Madison Torres Sterling had boarded her own metaphorical jet that day, not fleeing from justice like Jack and Amber, but flying toward a future built on truth, dignity, and the unshakable knowledge that she was stronger than anyone who tried to tear her down. The pregnant wife had indeed boarded a jet while the mistress begged at the runway. But the real story was about a woman who had discovered that her greatest strength came not from the wealth and status her husband provided, but from her own courage, intelligence, and refusal to accept anything less than the truth. And in the end, that truth had set her free. And that's how a pregnant wife turned the tables on the husband who tried to destroy her. Madison Torres proved that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone underestimates. If this story had you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button because it helps more people discover these incredible true stories. Drop a comment and let me know. What would you have done in Madison's situation? Would you have fought back or walked away? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss our latest stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things when their backs are against the wall. Trust me, next week's story is even more unbelievable. Thanks for watching, and remember, your story isn't over until you decide it is.